All right. Hey, Jody. So good to
Hey,
see you.
Emily.
I love your shirt. It's fun.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're always looking very tropical and happy. So we're going to talk a little bit about PPP. And of course, we work with Summit CPA. They are our CFO company that we partner with. And a little bit about Jody. Jody is the co-founder and CEO of Summit, the leading provider of virtual CFO services in North America. He's passionate about changing the way people think about accounting. And he's the author of Digital Dollars and Cents. He literally wrote the book on helping digital companies create a financial roadmap to success, which I can vouch for because that's what you guys help us with. So welcome. Um, so we wanted to talk about PPP, and I think the first thing I wanted to talk about was how should we be thinking about using this money?
Yeah, that's a good question because with the PPP, when it was rolled out, the guidance was very limited, and it's kind of funny because the guidance keeps changing pretty much on a daily basis. So what I tell you today may not be the case in a week from now or 2 weeks from now. So there's kind of screwy in that regard, but they're coming up with clarifications all the time. They're not really changing the rules per se, but they're clarifying what they meant by the rules, which you can look at that either way, I guess. But the main thing that the PPP was designed for was to cover payroll costs. So payroll costs was one of the major calculations in determining how to determine the PPP, and then the additional amount, which basically covers the 2 times. So if you remember when we did the payroll cost, or when we did the loan calculation, was 2.5 times a specific number of your payroll. Well, that 2 times was to cover the payroll in that 8-week period. The other half was to cover the other stuff. And what are the other stuff? Well, the other stuff would be like your rent. So your rent would be covered in that period. If you didn't have rent, but let's say you had a mortgage, and so your mortgage interest would be covered within that period, and you can pay for that. And then the only other thing really is the utilities, and utilities would be power, water, gas, transportation, internet. Also, they're looking at telephone as a potential thing. Now, the clarification of that I'm sure will come out, but we're recommending telephone to be part of that as well. And with like the leases themselves, let me back up real quick. The leases, they have to be in place by February 15th. So you just can't go and create a lease after the fact and then start charging an ungodly amount of money. So rent, utilities, and interest on the mortgage are the three non-payroll costs. And what are the payroll costs? I guess that's another great question. Because again, it was designed primarily for that. Well, payroll costs would be your wages, salaries up to $100,000. And so how do they determine that? Well, right now our guidance shows that the number is $15,385. So that's the cap that they're going to give everybody's salary within that 8-week period. And if you take that, divide by 8 and multiply by 52, it comes out to that $100,000. So 15,835 looks like that's going to be the cap. And so what does that mean? That's another question. That means that even if you hired somebody, gave them a $10,000 sign-on bonus, and maybe they only made $50,000 for the year, you're capped at that $15,835 during that 8-week period. So you have to make sure that when doing things, you take that into consideration. Other things would be the employer portion of the state and local taxes, like your SUTA tax, cell phone unemployment tax, or SUI tax, and then also your match on your retirement plan for the non-owners, and as well as healthcare for the non-owners. So those are the primary things. I guess with healthcare, you could throw dental, vision, and health into that bucket. So those are the primary purpose or primary reason for it was for health. Now, how do they determine how much that you can have? That's another thing, because it's not like all of it is included. And so what they do is there's a two-point test on this. And the first test is they want the payroll to be at least 75% of the amount of the forgiveness. And so if you had, let's say you had a loan for $150,000, let's say, and your payroll ended up being 75,000. Well, 75,000 plus 25%, so it would be 100,000. Basically, $100,000 roughly is what you'd be able to forgive out of that loan. So backing up again, you're looking at payroll costs. You want your payroll costs to be at least 75% of the amount of the forgiveness. Anything less than that, you're going to get a portion of that forgiven. You won't get the full amount. And then the non expenses I mentioned before is 25% of the forgivable portion, not of the loan, but the forgivable portion of payroll. So again, if your payroll is 100,000, then 25%, 25,000 of that is really all you can deduct in your other stuff, I guess, what I would call it there, the other forgivable amounts.
So what happens with the amount that's not forgiven?
Yeah, well, the amount that's not forgiven turns into a really nice loan. It's a 1% loan. It's deferred for 6 months, and then it's the term over 2 years. So, and it's also, it has with no prepayment penalty. So anything that's not forgiven will convert to a loan, and again, you can use that loan then for really anything you want at that point. Because there's no prepayment penalty, you could afterwards just simply pay it back, which is perfectly fine. I wouldn't recommend that because there's so much uncertainty out there right now. It's probably not a bad idea, and a risk definitely worth taking to keep that money and maybe keep it through December to see how things are going. And it really depends on what kind of position your company's in, where you may need it right today. But if you don't need it today, like I said, I wouldn't really recommend paying it off right away, but just maybe hanging on to it for a little bit. But just noting that there is no prepayment penalty, so you can pay it off anytime you want, and the interest rate is 1%. So it's a very, very favorable loan for you.
Totally. And what about taxes? Like, is the forgiven amount taxed?
Yeah, so that's the nice thing about the way the loan program works is that the forgiven amount is not taxable. So it's not taxable at all. So with that, it's really truly tax-free money. So if you think about it in net income wise and back into the taxes, and let's say that your forgivable loan is $100,000. Well, technically they just about gave you, if you back into it, about $150,000 of free money, that type of thing. If you look at the tax situation there of net income. So the amount of the forgivable loan is 100% non-taxable. But I will tell you that I would highly not recommend trying to game the system at all, because that could result in penalties. It could result in pretty much in anything the government wants to do at that point, because what they don't want to see is they don't want to see gaming the system. Sure. And what I mean by gaming the system is that in an 8-week period, you should not have 4 rent payments. You should not have 5 utility bills of the same bill. You should not give your people huge bonuses to get you over the dollar amount. They don't want to see that. That's what we call gaming the system. And if they find that you do that, there's a good possibility they could disqualify the entire amount, make it taxable, do whatever they really want to at that point, because there's really no guidance on what the damages are going to be. And you might have heard of different companies in the news right now, which they're being called out for maybe companies that didn't necessarily need the money to begin with, and they felt that those companies are quote unquote gaming the system, so they're making them pay them back without penalty at this point, but and having them come forth on their own, so that they have an opportunity to give that money back without penalties. But if they go through the process, and and they will, a portion of the people listening here are going to get a call from the IRS explaining, hey, why did you feel you qualified for this loan, that type of thing, because we saw that, your wages didn't go down, or whatever that might be. Just be prepared to make sure you have a good answer for those questions. And the biggest answer for it is really the uncertainty out there in the market. The idea is not to lay employees off, and so keeping the money for that purpose is a big thing. So if we can make sure that we have the loan legitimately, use it against expenses that are legitimate expenses, and not again game the system. I think the majority of your loan should be forgiven if you meet all the qualifications, if not all of your loan.
Yeah, the CFO from your team that we work with, Michelle, had us tracking sort of losses that we were experiencing before we got the PPP, so that we could have that actually tracked and saved somewhere if it was ever questioned on our site.
Oh, for sure, yeah, because it's real easy to forget, especially when you've got you're being challenged on it. Forget, why did I do it? Because hindsight is a lot easier to predict than the opposite, right? Mm-hmm. It's hard to predict the future, but when you're in the future, it's easy to predict. But in the past, because it happened. And so when, 8 weeks down the road or whatever, we're looking for the forgiveness, and you're looking at, why did I need this loan? Because maybe I didn't. Nothing really did, happen to us at that time. Well, that wasn't the belief that we had going into it, right? So maybe, like in your case, maybe you had a few clients that had to put things on pause, and so we froze their fees, or maybe there were certain clients that we had to give significant discounts to because maybe all their employees were gone, and so then there's the thing. Well, is that going to happen to all of our clients? And then your mind starts racing. So there's that huge uncertainty there that we may have had, when we asked for the loan to begin with, and that uncertainty is truly real, because you realize that there's 8 or 10 clients that maybe we had to waive their fees for an 8-week period or something like that, just so that they could stay in business. That type of thing goes, is easily forgotten when it comes down the road, and ask, why did you do something? Because in reality, we didn't let people go because we had the opportunity having these loans, which gave us the security to not make those really rushed decisions. So yeah, so it's really important, like Emily, like you're saying, to make sure you document the reasons why, so that those reasons don't get forgotten.
Yeah, it's like a week is like a quarter, like that's the speed that we're operating
Yeah, for
in.
sure.
You go from 1 week and you're like, oh my God, it's only been 5 days and there's been so much change in a week. It's just crazy.
For sure.
Craziness. And then what type of documents do we need to have when we're requesting the forgiveness, and when should we, what's the timeline to do that?
Yeah, good question. So the documents, basically the statute has given the banks full authority to require or to basically have certain specific documents that they want to verify the loan. So each bank's going to be, unfortunately, completely different in what they're going to ask for, guaranteed. So be prepared, and whatever they ask for, that's what the information that they will need. But what we do know for certain is they're going to want your payroll reports for that period of time. So they're going to want to know, your payroll. They're going to want a copy of your lease. They're going to want copies of your utility bills, and some of them will just require a bank statement showing them taking out. Others will require the actual utility bill. So make sure that you have all that information. If you're distributed like we are, meaning our team is spread throughout the United States, they're gonna, we've got other issues. Maybe we're going to need to know a percentage of what their home office expense that our team is using, if we're actually reimbursing for that, or we're going to need to have cell phone bills or telephone bills because we don't have a landline like most companies would have. There's some different things like that we're going to have to really make sure that we gather that information during this 8-week period versus waiting for the end when it's really tough to get that information in hindsight. So the type of documents again would be basically your payroll reports, lease agreements, utility bills. If you don't have a maybe a lease or proof of lease, maybe showing the last 10 payments of lease, so there's no difference or no duplication of leases. They may require your bank statements so they can see money coming in and out. So there's a lot of different things that they may require. So it's going to be really be a bank by bank decision, and there will, of course, will be a lot more guidance coming out over the next few weeks as the banks are requesting information, because again, the banks don't want to be stuck with a bad loan either. So they're going to make sure that they do their due diligence, of course, and gathering this information. But right now is the time to do it. Don't wait until the end of the 8 weeks to do that. And then once those 8 weeks are over, then when we actually then apply for the forgiveness, the bank will request all that information. And as soon as they have the last piece of information, they're on the clock now, and they've got 60 days to determine the amount of forgiveness. So don't expect that money to come and be forgiven right away. It will take a little while for it to be forgiven. So it's recorded on your accounting books as a loan until the amount's forgiven. Then you take it to your other income account.
Cool. So the banks are the ones that are doing the due diligence around forgiveness.
100%.
Wow. That's so interesting.
Mm-hmm.
How in the world they're going to manage that process after just getting everybody through the
I feel bad for them. I feel real bad for them.
Like, how did we get involved in this?
I don't think I realized. I hope you know your banker very well.
Yeah, we do. Cool. Well, any other words of wisdom around PPP to close us out?
This was a unique situation in which the government really did do a great honor to the small businesses by giving us this opportunity to basically account for, to make it easier for us in the climate of the virus. And so please take advantage of it to the fullest. Make sure you're using it the right way, and please don't try to game it, like we mentioned before. And in doing so, you could definitely help retain some of your really quality people. And that's again the reason for it to begin with, is so you don't have to lay those great individuals off. So again, a great program. It's just unfortunate that it was rolled out in the way it was, where a lot of confusion and a lot of disappointment, and possibly more confusion and disappointment as Congress gets everything together and figures out how to do this, and the banks aren't on board. So again, it was one of those things the banks had a last minute change to try to figure out, and unfortunately they got stuck in the hot seat. And it's unfortunate in that way, but hopefully this program will help a lot of people, and a lot of small businesses stay in business and potentially grow from there.
Yeah, we were on the eve of layoffs basically, and it was a really scary time. I actually like broke down in front of my team, sobbing. I couldn't believe this was happening, and how are we going to get through this? And a whole bunch of things happened that night, one of which was they approved the PPP, and Michelle was like, all right, you don't have to do any layoffs, and jobs were saved. So I agree with you. Like, it's been a huge win for the small business community to have this opportunity, but it is confusing, and the government program and the banks are, this is not something anybody's prepared for. So.
Oh, for sure.
Well, thank you for sharing your wisdom. Again, guys, this is Jody Grunden. He is the co-founder and CEO of Summit CPA Group, the leading provider of virtual CFO services in North America. We actually work with Summit CPA and have for many, many years now. They provide all of our outsourced CFO services. So thank you, Jody. It was great to see you.
Thanks, Emily. Appreciate it.
Thanks for joining.